Somewhere beneath the cloud tops of Jupiter, far deeper than any probe has ever traveled, hydrogen is squeezed so tightly by the weight of the planet above it that it stops behaving like a gas or even a liquid and begins to conduct electricity like a metal. Jupiter holds more than twice the mass of every other planet in the solar system combined, and yet from a great distance it appears as nothing more than a steady point of light, patient and pale, no different at first from the scattered stars behind it. The approach begins in silence and takes a long time. There is no sensation of speed, only the slow brightening of that point of light as it resolves, gradually, into something with dimension. What had been a single spot becomes a disk, faint at first, then warmer in color. A soft amber and cream gathering itself out of the dark, the way a lamp brightens in a window seen from across a wide field. Before the planet itself fills the view, there is something else. Thin and almost imperceptible, a set of rings circles Jupiter at an angle so shallow they nearly vanish when seen edge-on. They are nothing like the broad, bright rings of Saturn, which catch sunlight and throw it back in bold arcs. These rings are made mostly of fine dark dust, shed long ago by small moons moving through them, and they scatter so little light that no one knew they were there at all until a spacecraft called Voyager 1 passed through the Jovian system in 1979 and looked back at the planet with its cameras aimed toward the sun. The rings appeared then, faint and gossamer, barely distinguishable from the dark around them, like a smear of breath on cold glass. There is something quietly moving about this, the idea that a feature so large, these rings span hundreds of thousands of kilometers, could go entirely unnoticed for so long, hiding not in shadow but in plain view, waiting to be seen from the right angle. For all of recorded human history, Jupiter hung in the night sky as a bright wandering light, and its rings were simply invisible, present and patient, circling without witness. The planet continues to grow. The amber disk deepens into something more complex, the surface, though surface is not quite the right word for what Jupiter has, resolving into bands of cloud that wrap the entire world in long horizontal stripes. There are creams and tans and a dusky orange-brown, and at the poles, the banding breaks up into something more chaotic, swirls and eddies that give those regions a different texture from the orderly belts at the equator. Even from this distance, the scale is difficult to absorb. Jupiter's diameter is roughly 11 times that of Earth. A line of 11 Earths placed side by side would span the planet's width, and that comparison, while accurate, still somehow fails to communicate the thing itself. The rings drift past as the approach continues, and through them, moving in slow paths around the planet, the moons become visible. They are many. Jupiter has more than 90 known moons, a system so populous it resembles a small solar system of its own, with the large moons governing the inner orbits and smaller, stranger bodies tracing paths far out into the dark. Some of these outer moons are captured objects, ancient wanderers that came too close to Jupiter's gravity long ago and were drawn into permanent orbit, still traveling at odd angles that suggest they were not born here, but arrived from somewhere else entirely. The 4 largest moons are the ones that draw the eye. They were first noticed by the astronomer Galileo in the winter of 1610, when he turned an early telescope toward Jupiter on several successive nights and saw 4 small points of light that changed position, moving back and forth in a line. He understood, over the course of those nights, that they were circling the planet, which made them the first objects ever observed to orbit something other than Earth. The discovery mattered enormously for what it said about the structure of the cosmos, but on this slow approach, stripped of its historical weight, it is simply the sight of 4 worlds in motion, tracing their paths without hurry. The rings thin and scatter behind as the approach carries onward toward the planet itself. Jupiter fills more and more of the view. The banding is clearer now, the individual cloud layers distinguishable from one another, the boundaries between them soft and drifting rather than sharp. Below and ahead, the planet radiates a faint warmth, not perceived as heat yet, but present in a subtler way. The way a room with a fire on the other side of a heavy door still registers as different from the corridor leading to it. The amber light of Jupiter holds steady against the surrounding, dark, enormous, and unhurried. A world that has been here for over 4 billion years and shows no particular sign of urgency about anything that follows. The moons appear one at a time, each arriving in the field of view, not with any sudden movement, but the way stars become visible at dusk, gradually present, as though they were always there and only the light needed time to arrange itself properly. Ganymede is the largest of them, and its scale registers slowly, the way the size of a mountain registers only when something familiar, a tree line, a road, appears near its base and suddenly recalibrates everything. Ganymede is wider than Mercury, which is itself a planet, and yet here it moves in patient orbit around Jupiter rather than around the Sun, a world subordinate to a larger world, carrying its own ancient geography of grooved terrain and crater fields and pale, icy ridges that stretch across its surface like the seams of something that was once broken, and then very slowly, over enormous spans of time, settled into its present form. There is no atmosphere to speak of on Ganymede, nothing to blur its edges or soften the shadows that fall across its face. It presents itself clearly, a grey-brown sphere rotating with quiet steadiness, its surface catching the distant sun at a low and gentle angle. It is not a world that invites urgency. It is a world that has been doing what it does for longer than any recorded history, longer than the oldest stone formations on Earth, longer than anything with a name. Ganymede drifts past at its own pace, neither hurrying nor slowing, simply following the path its gravity has kept it on for billions of years. And as it moves away from the center of the view, another moon takes its place in the mid-distance. Europa is smaller, and its surface is immediately different in character. Where Ganymede shows the marks of ancient impact and deep geological time pressed into its face, Europa is smooth, almost unmarked by craters, its ice shell white and faintly traced with long reddish-brown lines that cross and recross its surface like cracks in old porcelain. Those lines are fractures, places where the ice has split and shifted, where material from somewhere below has risen through the gaps and refrozen, leaving its color behind as a record of movement. The smoothness is the thing that takes time to fully absorb. A surface without many craters is a surface that has been repaved. Geologically speaking, its old scars healed over by some ongoing process. For Europa, that process is driven by what lies beneath the ice, which is an ocean, liquid and dark and deep, kept from freezing by the flexing that Jupiter's gravity causes as Europa moves through its orbit. The ice above presses down, the water below presses up. The shell moves, slowly and continuously, over timescales that make the word slowly almost meaningless. The ocean under Europa's ice has been liquid for a very long time. The ice above it is thought to be dozens of miles thick in places, and below that, the water goes down further still, into darkness that the sun has never touched and never will. It is the kind of darkness that exists without absence, a darkness that has always been, that has no memory of light to miss. Things may or may not stir in that darkness. That part of the story belongs to another time. From the outside, Europa shows none of this. It is a white sphere with rust-colored lines, moving in its orbit with the same patient geometry as everything else in this part of the solar system, reflecting sunlight back into the dark as though the ocean beneath were simply a detail, a private matter, something it keeps to itself. There are other moons, smaller and darker and more distant in their orbits, some of them likely captured long ago from elsewhere, their compositions different from the large moons closer in, their surfaces irregular and uneven, where they haven't had the gravity to pull themselves into the rounded shape that larger bodies take on over time. These are quieter presences, more like companions in passing than subjects of study, and they move through the view without demanding much attention. Each moon carries its own gravity, its own interior history, its own relationship to Jupiter and to the other moons. They tug at one another in ways too subtle to perceive in the moment, the tidal forces passing silently between them across distances of hundreds of thousands of miles. The whole system has been in this conversation for longer than the Earth has had its present continents. And as the moons drift back into the surrounding dark, each returning to its place in the wider view, what remains is the planet itself, filling more of the frame now than before, its amber and cream and deep rust cloud bands becoming more distinct, the scale of it settling in more completely as the distance between here and there continues to close, slowly, without urgency, 1 quiet mile at a time. The scale settles in and keeps settling, as though the mind's ability to hold a thing this large takes time to catch up with what the eyes are already receiving. There is a way of looking at Jupiter that has nothing to do with the planet as it appears now, banded and luminous against the black, and everything to do with what it has been doing quietly for a very long time. The planet has been in this orbit, more or less, for nearly as long as the solar system itself has existed, somewhere around 4.5 billion years. And in that span of time, its presence has shaped things in ways that are felt everywhere in the solar system, including on worlds that never come close to it at all. It begins with size. Jupiter contains more than twice the mass of all the other planets combined, a fact that does not fully register as a number, but begins to make sense when considered in terms of what that much mass does to the space around it. Gravity reaches. And Jupiter's gravity reaches farther and more powerfully than anything else in the solar system except the Sun. Every small body drifting through the outer reaches of the solar system, the loose, icy fragments left over from the formation of the planets, the rocky debris that never gathered itself into anything larger, all of it exists in a relationship with Jupiter, whether or not it ever approaches the planet directly. For billions of years, the planet has been doing something that requires no intention and no effort. It has been deflecting things. Comets falling inward from the cold outer regions of the solar system, following long, slow arcs that might have carried them into the inner planets, have instead encountered Jupiter's gravity and been redirected. Some have been pulled down into the planet itself. Others have been flung outward, sent on new trajectories that carry them away from the Sun entirely, out into the dark beyond the edge of the solar system, where they will not return for millions of years, if they return at all. The planet acts as a kind of sieve, or a shepherd, not choosing what passes through, simply being large enough that its presence changes the geometry of the space around it. The evidence for this is visible, in a way, in the relative stillness of the inner solar system. The rocky planets, including the one that supports everything that has ever lived and died and wondered about the night sky, have been struck many times over the course of their histories, and those impacts have mattered, have changed things. But the frequency of such events has been lower than it might otherwise have been. The rate of bombardment slowed gradually over the long arc of planetary history, and Jupiter's presence in the outer solar system is part of the reason. Not a shield in any deliberate sense, not a wall, but a gravitational tendency that has, over time, removed a great many objects from orbits that would have intersected the orbits of the inner worlds. What this means, held quietly and without being pressed too hard, is that Jupiter has been exerting a kind of influence on the conditions of the inner solar system for the entirety of the time that anything on Earth has been alive to experience those conditions. The first simple organisms that appeared in the ancient oceans developed on a planet whose impact rate had already been reduced, in part, by a gas giant 5 times farther from the Sun. The long, slow process of life becoming more complex, of the atmosphere changing, of oceans persisting long enough for anything to evolve within them. All of this unfolded in a neighborhood that was not entirely random in its character, a neighborhood partly shaped by that enormous presence in the outer dark. Deep time has a texture that is difficult to hold in the mind for very long. 4 billion years is a number that the mind accepts without truly absorbing. But sometimes a single continuous thing, a planet that has occupied the same region of space for all of that time, doing the same quiet gravitational work, pulling and flinging and absorbing for every second of every year of every epoch, sometimes that is easier to feel than to calculate. Jupiter has not changed in any fundamental way since before the first rock solidified on the surface of the Earth. It has simply been present, large and unhurried, while everything else in the solar system found its way into the arrangement it now occupies. There is something in that continuity that belongs to the same register as the Moon's slow orbital conversations, not dramatic, not pointed toward any outcome, simply the way things have been for longer than the word long does any real work. The planet ahead is not ancient in the way that ruins are ancient, carrying the traces of what was built and what collapsed. It is ancient in the way that a deep current is ancient, moving through the same water in the same direction for reasons that have not changed and will not change, patient in a way that has nothing to do with patience, simply ongoing in the way that mass and gravity and time, given enough of all three, tend to be ongoing. The amber bands are clearer now than they were. The cloud structure is beginning to resolve into something that can be followed with the eye, long horizontal lines of color stretching all the way around a planet so large that the curve of it is barely visible at this distance, the surface appearing almost flat in the widest view, the way a very large sphere always does when you are close enough to it, that the horizon seems nearly level. The approach continues, unhurried, the planet growing by increments too small to track from one moment to the next, only visible as a change when enough moments have passed. And below the clouds, beneath whatever the eye can reach from here, the planet has been warm for all of that time, generating its own heat from within, a warmth that has nothing to do with the sun and everything to do with what Jupiter is, still slowly settling, still releasing the energy of its own formation across billions of years, a slow exhalation that will continue long after the current arrangement of the solar system has changed beyond recognition. The outermost edge of the atmosphere is not a wall or a threshold, but something more like a gradual thickening, the way a fog deepens as one moves into it rather than encountering a single moment of entry, the boundary between space and sky so diffuse that no single instant of crossing it can be named. And what begins to surround the descent here is already moving, already caught up in something immense and relentless and old. Jupiter turns. It turns faster than any other planet in the solar system, faster than the gas and cloud and storm that make up its visible face should reasonably be able to hold together, and yet it does, completing one full rotation, one full day. In just under 10 hours, a pace so much swifter than Earth's familiar rhythm that the mind requires a moment to settle with it, to let the comparison take hold before moving on. A 10-hour day, stretched across a planet wider than 11 Earths, laid side by side. The effect of this speed on the clouds is immediate and total, and has been shaping the planet's face since the earliest time that any face could be said to exist. The rotation drags everything into bands. Where a slower planet might allow its weather to move in circular patterns, drifting unpredictably across the surface, Jupiter's spin pulls cloud and gas and wind into long horizontal ribbons that run parallel to the equator, circling the planet's entire girth without break, some pale and wide, others dark and narrow, all of them moving at slightly different speeds relative to one another, the lighter bands drifting one direction, the darker bands sliding in the other, a vast, slow shearing that has been occurring continuously and will continue for as long as the planet holds its shape. The colors are not simple. From a distance, they appear as clean stripes of amber and cream and ochre and something approaching rust. But within them there is variation, gradation, a layering of tone that deepens and shifts. The longer attention rests on it, the cream bands carrying within them faint threads of gold, the darker belts streaked through with brown and red, and something almost orange, all of it moving, all of it alive in the way that weather is alive, responsive to pressures and temperatures and velocities that play out at a scale that has no equivalent anywhere on Earth. And beneath the visible surface of all this, beneath the constant lateral motion of the banded clouds, there is something else. Jupiter hums. It is not a sound in the way that sound requires air and ears and a body to receive it, but it is a genuine signal, a real emission, something the planet produces and sends outward in the same way that a struck bell continues to ring after the strike. Not a metaphor, but an analogy, an attempt to give shape to something that has no direct counterpart in ordinary experience. The planet generates powerful natural radio waves, pulses and rhythms that arise from the interaction between its enormous magnetic field and the charged particles that flow through that field. And if those waves are translated into something audible, what emerges is not silence and not noise, but something in between, a low and irregular rhythm, a kind of breathing, a hiss and a crackle, and underneath it a throb that recurs without being perfectly regular, the way a sleeping body's sounds recur, present and rhythmic, but never precisely metered. No other planet in the solar system produces anything quite like it. The others are quieter in that particular way, or they produce signals with a different character, cleaner or more chaotic or simply less present. But Jupiter's emission carries with it a quality that resists easy description, something that sits at the edge of perception and asks to be felt rather than analyzed. A low, persistent presence like the sound of a large building at night when all its machinery is still running. But no particular machine announces itself, just the composite hum of something very large continuing to be. Inside the upper atmosphere now, inside the movement and the banding and the hum, the scale of everything reasserts itself in a new way. The bands that appeared as stripes from a distance are not stripes at all from within. They are entire weather systems, enormous jet streams carrying winds that move at hundreds of kilometers per hour, sustained and consistent and ancient, not the transient weather of a terrestrial afternoon, but something more like permanent features of geography, as fixed in their way as mountain ranges, as defining of the landscape as any continent, the whole system locked in its pattern by the rotation and by the physics of a world made entirely of gas and the forces that shape it. The air here. If air is even the right word for something so different in composition from what that word usually conjures, a mixture of hydrogen and helium with traces of methane and ammonia and water and many other compounds in small amounts, is cold in the uppermost reaches, cold in the way that high altitude is cold on Earth. But the cold is already giving way to something else lower down, the planet's own warmth rising to meet the descent from far below. Though that warmth is not yet felt here, only anticipated, a quality of the planet rather than a present sensation. The descent moves deeper, carried along by the same forces that have pulled everything toward Jupiter since the beginning. The planet's gravity immense and matter-of-fact, not dramatic, simply present. A constant gentle insistence in one direction, downward, always downward, into the thickening air and the slow colors and the hum that continues without interruption. The hum that has been there since before any observer existed to register it, that will continue long after the descent is complete and the planet has returned to its unobserved patience, turning and banding and humming to no one, enormous and warm, and endlessly in motion. The colors deepen as the descent continues southward along the planet's face, and then the storm comes into view. It appears first as a change in the light, a warm reddish tone gathering at the edge of perception, the banded clouds beginning to curve in ways that suggest something organizing them from below, something patient and large that has been turning in the same direction for a very long time. The great red spot does not announce itself. It simply becomes visible, the way a continent becomes visible from a great altitude, not arriving so much as gradually resolving out of what was already there. The storm is wider than the entire planet Earth. That fact settles slowly, the way large facts tend to, arriving not as a shock, but as a quiet recalibration of what scale means in this place. A person standing at its western edge would need to travel farther than the distance between Earth's poles to reach the eastern edge, and by the time they arrived, the whole system would have rotated beneath them, and the edge they started from would be somewhere else entirely. The storm does not hold still. It turns counterclockwise, unhurried, one full rotation taking several days, its outer bands drawing in smaller cloud formations and folding them into its motion, the way a slow current absorbs ripples. And yet from a distance, from the vantage of this descent moving alongside it through the upper cloud layers, the great red spot reads almost as stillness. This is partly a matter of scale, everything so large that its motion registers only over long observation, and partly something harder to name, a quality the storm itself seems to carry, a kind of authority that comes from having persisted so long that turbulence has become its natural state, indistinguishable now from calm. What would be a catastrophe on a smaller world is simply the weather here, the ordinary condition of this latitude, this pressure band, this particular arrangement of gases that has sustained itself through centuries without any apparent intention of stopping. The red color comes from the chemistry of the clouds, compounds rising from lower in the atmosphere and reacting with the light and the pressure at this altitude, producing pigments that shift over time, sometimes brighter, sometimes faded toward pale salmon or almost white, the storm cycling through its own slow palette across the years. It has been observed changing, even in the time since human instruments first turned toward it, growing somewhat smaller over the long centuries, its width contracting gradually, though so gradually that the change is visible only when measurements are laid end-to-end across generations of observation. Even shrinking, it remains larger than any storm that has ever formed on Earth. Even diminished, it is one of the largest sustained atmospheric structures in the solar system. The descent moves alongside rather than through the storm's heart, carried along the outer boundary where the clouds swirl in long arcing streamers, some of them extending far out into the surrounding bands before being drawn back in, the storm breathing in a sense, incorporating the atmosphere around it and cycling it through its own circulation and releasing it again, changed in temperature and composition, marked by the passage. The boundary region has its own texture, layers of cloud at different altitudes, moving at slightly different speeds, the whole system layered like something sedimentary, depth made visible through motion. There is something restful in watching a thing, this large move at this pace. The eye has nowhere urgent to go. The storm fills the available field of attention completely, and because it is too large to take in all at once, the mind settles on whatever portion is nearest, the curve of a particular cloud edge, the way a tendril of reddish vapor extends and thins, and finally blurs into the surrounding gold. The subtle variation in tone across the face of the whole system, darker toward the center, lighter at the outer edges where the clouds are thinner. The storm has been doing this since before any human being existed to observe it. It was turning when the first cities were being built along the rivers of the inner planet's third world, when the ice ages came and went, when the oceans rose and fell, the great red spot turning and turning in the southern hemisphere of Jupiter, indifferent to all of it, not hostile, not benevolent, simply a feature of the planet, the way a mountain range is a feature of a smaller world, permanent on any human timescale, ordinary on Jupiter's own. The clouds here carry a warmth that is faintly perceptible against the cold of the surrounding upper atmosphere, the storm generating its own heat through the compression and circulation of gases, a warmth that rises from below, where the pressure is higher and the temperature climbs. That warmth mixes into the outer bands and dissipates, but close to the storm, close enough to move alongside it at this altitude, it is present as a quality of the air, a subtle denseness, a sense that the descent has moved into a region where the atmosphere is doing more work, more actively turning over, more energetic in its circulation even as it appears from the outside, so slow and stately. The storm turns. The descent continues. These two motions exist alongside each other without urgency, the storm following its own ancient rhythm, the descent following its own, both of them carried along by the planet's rotation, swept around in that enormous 10-hour circle, everything moving at once, everything moving together, the storm and the clouds and the falling presence moving through them, all turning and falling and turning as the colors deepen below and the red of the storm fades gradually behind, not disappearing suddenly but receding with the same patience it arrived with, its reddish light softening into the distance, the storm still turning back there in the south, turning as it has always turned, as it will continue to turn long. The gas thickens without announcing itself. There is no moment of crossing, no threshold that declares itself, no change in color or texture that signals the passage from one state to another. It simply becomes, gradually and without ceremony, more present, more substantial, more resistant to the movement through it. The pressure builds in the way that deep water builds around a slow descent, not as a wall encountered, but as an accumulation, a surrounding that closes in from every direction simultaneously, patient and absolute. There is no floor waiting below. There has never been one, and the descent will not find one no matter how far it carries. Jupiter is not a place with a center that can be stood upon. It is a place that goes on becoming itself, layer into layer, each one thicker and denser and warmer than the one above, but none of them hard, none of them a stopping point, none of them anything other than more of what has been falling through all along. Other planets offer a surface eventually, a place where the sky ends and the ground begins, where something solid pushes back. Jupiter offers no such resolution, it only offers continuation. The gas that fills this middle depth is hydrogen, still, as it has been from the very beginning of the descent, as it will be for a very long time yet. But hydrogen here has lost some of the lightness it carried in the upper layers. It has been pressed together, warmed from below, held under a weight of atmosphere so enormous that the mind offers no useful comparison. It is no longer the thin, bright, cloud-streaked medium of the outer bands. It has become something heavier, something that moves differently, something that yields, but yields slowly. And then, continuing downward, the hydrogen does something that hydrogen does not do at the surface of any familiar world. Without any clear border, without any sudden transformation, it stops being gas and begins being liquid. This is not a surface like the surface of an ocean. There is no open air above a still expanse of water. The liquid does not begin where the gas ends because the gas does not truly end. There is simply a depth at which the conditions have shifted enough that the hydrogen around the descent behaves the way a liquid behaves. It flows, it presses in uniform directions, it has a density that carries weight. The transition is a gradual becoming, the way a color shifts across a long horizon, and anyone watching for the exact moment of change would watch and never find it. What they would find is the ocean itself, once the transition has settled around them, the largest ocean anywhere in the solar system, larger than anything the inner planets can offer, larger than any body of water that has ever existed on a rocky world. It stretches in every direction, not flat, because there is no surface from which flatness could be measured, but boundless, enveloping, pressing in from above and below, and every side simultaneously. It is made of liquid hydrogen rather than water, and it holds none of the associations that word ocean usually carries. There is no salt here, no current driven by moon pull or wind, no light filtering down from above in diminishing shafts. It is dark and dense and enormous. Something that surprises the expectation of deep cold is the warmth. Out in the space between planets, cold is the default. Distance from the sun means less light, less heat, more of the quiet, freezing dark that sits between all things. The assumption carried into a descent through a gas giant's atmosphere is that the deeper one falls, the colder and darker the surroundings become, the further one travels from the warmth of the sun above. But Jupiter does not follow this expectation. Jupiter generates its own heat, a slow internal warmth that rises from the planet's deep interior outward, nearly twice the energy radiating outward from the planet as the planet receives from the sun far above. so the warmth comes from below. It rises to meet the descent, the way heat rises from the floor of a room where a fire has been burning for a very long time. It is not fierce, not dramatic, not the heat of something combusting or erupting. It is steady, old, the remnant warmth of a planet that has been slowly settling into itself since the early age of the solar system, releasing the energy stored in that ancient compression in a long, quiet exhale that has been going on for billions of years and will go on for billions more. The liquid hydrogen is warm. The darkness here is warm. The pressure pressing in from every direction carries warmth within it. This is the quality that the upper atmosphere had no way of suggesting. Up in the banded clouds, in the cold brightness of the outermost layers, in the swirl of the great storm turning in the south, there was scale and motion, and the impression of something vast but essentially open, essentially airy. Down here, the quality that surrounds the descent is not vastness, but closeness. Not the immensity of open space, but the immensity of something that has gathered itself in, that has become interior, that holds rather than extends. The liquid hydrogen presses in from everywhere. The warmth rises. The darkness is complete. And the descent continues downward, through the ocean, through the increasing pressure, through the rising heat, moving toward the deepest layers of all, where the planet's interior keeps its oldest and strangest conditions, where something more remarkable than liquid is waiting, patient and still. The hydrogen here is no longer a fluid in any familiar sense. It has been pressed so thoroughly, held under so much weight from the layers above, that it has crossed into a different kind of existence altogether, something that behaves less like a liquid and more like a metal, carrying electrical current the way copper or iron does, conducting rather than merely containing. It is still hydrogen, the simplest and most abundant element in the universe, the first thing that ever formed when the early cosmos cooled enough to allow atoms to hold themselves together. But under this pressure, under this heat, it has become something that would be unrecognizable to anyone who knew it, only as a colorless gas in a laboratory, or a component of water, or the fuel in a star. Down here, in the deep interior of Jupiter, it has been transformed by the sheer insistence of the planet pressing down upon it from above. The pressure at this depth is not something the body has any reference for. There is no analogy that holds. It is simply a condition of existence here, the way temperature and light are conditions at the surface of other worlds. It is not experienced as crushing, because there is no surface against which to be crushed, no exterior and interior that might be compressed toward one another. The pressure is distributed through everything, uniform, total, a quality of the place rather than a force acting upon it from one direction. It simply is. And within it, the metallic hydrogen rests, thick and warm and dark, conducting the electrical currents that give Jupiter its powerful magnetic field. The field that extends so far from the planet that it engulfs several of the moons, that reaches across a volume of space larger than the Sun itself, all of it generated here, in this quiet, dense, lightless layer far below the clouds. The warmth at this depth comes from the planet's own interior, from the slow settling and compression that has continued since Jupiter first gathered itself together out of the gas and dust of the early solar system. That settling releases heat. It has been releasing heat for 4.5 billion years. It will continue for a very long time yet. And so the warmth that rises through the metallic hydrogen is ancient warmth. Warmth that has been accumulating and radiating outward for longer than Earth has existed, longer than the Sun has been burning in its current way, a patience so deep it becomes difficult to think about directly. It is easier simply to feel it as a quality of the darkness here, not the cold of deep space, which is what instinct might expect at the heart of things, but a steady, sourceless warmth, rising from somewhere deeper still, from whatever lies at the very center of the planet, which no instrument has ever reached and no model has fully resolved. The descent has no final destination. That is perhaps the most important thing about this place, and also the quietest. There is no floor to arrive at, no surface to touch, no point at which motion would stop and stillness would begin. The metallic hydrogen continues downward, and somewhere below it the conditions grow stranger still. The temperature's higher, the density's greater, and whatever is at the core of Jupiter remains uncertain even to those who have spent their lives studying it. It does not matter down here. The question of what lies deeper does not press itself forward. The descent has slowed to something barely distinguishable from rest, moving through a medium that is almost too dense to move through, warm and dark and even, in all directions, the same. There is something almost restful about the absoluteness of this place. Not comfortable exactly, but complete. Nothing is missing here. Nothing is waiting to happen. The metallic hydrogen conducts its currents in slow, vast loops that take time to trace themselves out. Currents that circle the planet's interior in patterns that repeat over thousands of years, unhurried, methodical, indifferent to observation. The planet goes on generating its magnetic field, radiating its interior heat, spinning its great bands of cloud tens of thousands of kilometers above. The storm still turning in the south, the moons still drifting in their orbits, the rings still catching the distant sunlight in their faint, almost transparent way. All of that continues, as it has continued, as it will continue. And here, at the bottom of the descent, there is simply this: warmth and pressure and darkness. Hydrogen in its deepest form pressed into something new and ancient at once. The largest ocean in the solar system somewhere above. The icy distant moons somewhere above that. And above them the long dark distance to the next world. And then the next. And then eventually the small blue-white point that is the Earth, where something is drifting towards sleep. The planet holds all of it. It has always held all of it. The descent ends here, not because the planet ends, but because this is far enough, deep enough, still enough. The warmth rises. The darkness is complete. And everything, at this depth, is very quiet.